753 BCE. A city founded by twins and nursed by a wolf. Who would have thought this humble beginning would lead to the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen? At its height, the Roman Empire encompassed 70 million people across 5 million square kilometers, commanding over 21% of the world's population. In this documentary, we'll trace the critical milestones that shaped Rome's rise to greatness. From innovative engineering and military conquests to political strategy and cultural integration, each chapter in Rome's story reveals the foundations of an empire that would dominate the ancient world and leave an indelible mark on history. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating journeys through history's greatest empires. And in the comments, let us know which aspect of Rome's legacy you find the most remarkable. The founding of Rome. Our story begins in 753 BCE, a year that would mark the birth of one of history's most influential civilizations. On the banks of the Tiber River, a small settlement took root that would grow into the mighty city of Rome. But how did this modest beginning evolve into an empire that would shape the ancient world? Legend tells us of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, descendants of the god Mars. As infants, they were abandoned and left to die, but fate had other plans. A she-wolf found the brothers and nursed them back to health. This mythical tale of divine intervention and animal nurturing became a cornerstone of Roman identity, symbolizing the city's strength and resilience. As the brothers grew, their ambitions grew with them. They decided to found a city, but disagreement soon turned to conflict. In a violent dispute, Romulus killed his brother Remus, becoming the first king of the fledgling settlement. This act of fratricide, while brutal, set the stage for Rome's future, a city that would stop at nothing to achieve greatness. The young city's location proved crucial to its early success. Nestled along the Tiber River, Rome enjoyed natural defenses and easy access to trade routes. The river provided fresh water, irrigation for crops, and a highway for commerce. Surrounding hills offered protection from invaders, while fertile plains supported a growing population. These geographic advantages gave Rome a strong foundation for expansion. Archaeological evidence paints a picture of Rome's early days that both supports and challenges the legendary tales. Excavations on Palatine Hill reveal traces of early settlements, confirming the ancient text's description of Rome's original location. However, instead of a divinely ordained founding, archaeologists find signs of gradual development over time. The early Romans were resourceful, making the most of their environment. They farmed the fertile plains, fished the Tiber, and traded with neighboring peoples. This practical approach to survival laid the groundwork for Rome's future pragmatism and adaptability. Rome's position between Etruscan and Latin territories proved to be another key advantage. The young city became a melting pot of cultures, absorbing influences from its neighbors. From the Etruscans, they learned advanced engineering and architectural techniques. The The Latins contributed to Rome's language and religious practices. This cultural exchange enriched Roman society and provided valuable skills for future expansion. As Rome grew, so did its ambitions. The city's leaders looked beyond their immediate surroundings, forming alliances and engaging in conflicts with nearby settlements. These early political and military maneuvers were the first steps toward building an empire. Rome's ability to learn from and eventually dominate its neighbors became a hallmark of its rise to power. The founding of Rome in 753 BCE was more than just the birth of a city. It was the spark that ignited a civilization that would go on to conquer much of the known world. From its humble beginnings on the banks of the Tiber, Rome embarked on a journey that would see it become the center of a vast empire, leaving an indelible mark on human history. Overthrow of the Roman kings. Rome's journey from a small settlement to a world-conquering empire was far from smooth. In fact, just over 2 centuries after its founding, the city faced a crisis that would alter its destiny forever. The year 509 BCE marked a turning point in Roman history as the people of Rome overthrew their monarchy and established the Roman Republic. At the center of this dramatic transformation was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the last king of Rome. Known as Tarquin the Proud, he ruled with an iron fist, showing little regard for the rights of the people or the authority of the Senate. His reign was marked by tyranny, oppression, and the execution of political opponents. The Romans, who had long endured the rule of kings, found themselves pushed to the breaking point by Tarquin's excesses. The catalyst for rebellion came in the form of a personal tragedy that shook Roman society to its core. Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son, committed a heinous act that would seal the fate of the monarchy. He raped Lucretia, a noblewoman known for her virtue and beauty. This act of violence against a respected member of Roman society ignited a firestorm of outrage among the people. Lucretia's tragic fate became a rallying cry for those who sought to overthrow the tyrannical rule of the Tarquins. Led by key figures such as Lucius Junius Brutus and Collatinus, the people of Rome and the Senate united in their determination to end the monarchy once and for all. The revolt spread quickly, fueled by years of pent-up frustration and anger at the abuses of royal power. As the rebellion gained momentum, Tarquin the Proud found himself outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Unable to maintain his grip on power, he was driven from the city along with his family. The expulsion of the last king marked the end of the Roman monarchy and the birth of a new political system that would shape the course of Western civilization. In the wake of the king's overthrow, the Romans set about creating a new form of government based on the principles of shared power and accountability. The Roman Republic was founded on the idea that no single individual should wield absolute authority. Instead, power would be distributed among various institutions and officials, creating a system of checks and balances designed to prevent the rise of another tyrant. At the heart of this new system were the consuls, two elected officials who served as the chief executives and military commanders of the Republic. Brutus and Collatinus became the first consuls, tasked with the monumental challenge of establishing and consolidating the new government. Their leadership was crucial in guiding Rome through the tumultuous transition from monarchy to republic. The Roman Republic introduced several key innovations in government. The Senate, which had existed under the monarchy but with limited power, now took on a central role in shaping policy and advising the consuls. The people gained a voice through the assemblies, where they could vote on laws and elect officials. This distribution of power ensured that no single individual or group could dominate Roman politics. One of the most intriguing aspects of the new system was the office of dictator. In times of severe crisis, the Senate could appoint a temporary dictator with absolute power to handle emergencies. This provision was designed to allow for swift decision-making during military threats or other urgent situations, while still maintaining the overall republican structure. The sack of Rome by the Gauls. Rome's system of government, carefully designed to prevent tyranny, was about to face its greatest test. In 390 BCE, a threat emerged from the north that no political structure could have prepared them for. The Gallic invasion would shake Rome to its core and forever change the course of its history. The Gauls, led by their chieftain Brennus, swept down from the Alps with a ferocity that caught the Romans completely off guard. These Celtic warriors, known for their impressive stature and fearsome battle cries, had been pushing into northern Italy for years. But now, they set their sights on Rome itself. The two armies met at the Allia River just 11 miles north of Rome. What followed was a catastrophic defeat for the Romans. Their army, poorly prepared and outnumbered, crumbled in the face of the Gallic onslaught. The Battle of Allia became synonymous with disaster in Roman memory, a day of infamy that would haunt them for generations. With their defenses shattered, the Romans faced an unthinkable scenario. Their city lay open to the enemy. Most of the population fled, but a small group of defenders retreated to the Capitoline Hill, Rome's natural citadel. The Gauls poured into the abandoned streets, looting and burning as they went. The sack of Rome had begun. For months, the Gauls besieged the Capitoline, trying to starve out the last Roman holdouts. It was during this dark time that one of Rome's most famous legends was born. According to the story, the Gauls attempted a surprise night attack, scaling the steep cliffs of the Capitoline. They moved in silence, almost reaching the top undetected. But the sacred geese, kept in the temple of Juno, began to honk and flap their wings, alerting the defenders to the danger. This timely warning allowed the Romans to repel the attack, turning potential catastrophe into a moment of divine intervention in Roman myth. Despite this small victory, Rome's situation remained dire. Food was running low, and there seemed to be no hope of relief. In desperation, the Romans negotiated with Brennus. They agreed to pay a massive ransom in gold to end the siege and save what remained of their city. As the gold was being weighed, Brennus is said to have thrown his sword onto the scales, exclaiming, "Vae victis!" Woe to the vanquished. This phrase became etched in Roman memory, a stark reminder of the bitter taste of defeat and the harsh realities of power. The sack of Rome in 390 BCE was a pivotal moment in the city's history. It exposed serious weaknesses in Roman defenses and military organization. The ease with which the Gauls had defeated their army and breached their walls was a harsh wake-up call. In the aftermath, the Romans embarked on a series of crucial reforms. They rebuilt and strengthened the city walls, creating formidable defenses that would stand for centuries. The military underwent significant changes, with a focus on improving training, tactics, and equipment. The Romans learned valuable lessons about the importance of readiness and the dangers of complacency. Perhaps most importantly, the Gallic sack ignited a fierce determination in the Roman people. Never again would they allow their city to fall so easily to a foreign invader. This renewed sense of purpose and unity would drive Rome's expansion in the coming centuries. The Punic Wars and Rome's victory over Carthage. Rome's fierce determination to expand would soon be put to the ultimate test. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The clash between Rome and Carthage would redefine warfare and change the course of history for centuries to come. The Punic Wars, a series of epic conflicts that spanned from 264 BCE to 146 BCE, pitted Rome against its greatest rival, Carthage. These wars weren't just about territory, they were a struggle for dominance over the entire Western Mediterranean. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and both sides knew it. It all started with a dispute over Sicily. This strategic island, sitting right between Italy and North Africa, was too valuable for either power to ignore. Rome, still riding high from its successes in Italy, decided it was time to challenge Carthage's naval supremacy. But there was just one problem. Rome didn't have a navy. In a remarkable display of determination and ingenuity, the Romans built a fleet from scratch. They even invented a new piece of equipment called the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed them to turn sea battles into the kind of hand-to-hand combat they excelled at on land. This innovative approach helped Rome win several key naval battles, eventually leading to victory in the First Punic War after 23 years of conflict. But Carthage wasn't about to give up. The Second Punic War saw the rise of one of history's greatest military commanders, Hannibal Barca. In a move that stunned the ancient world, Hannibal led an army, complete with war elephants, across the treacherous Alps to attack Rome from the north. It was a gamble that paid off initially, as Hannibal won several crushing victories on Italian soil. The Romans found themselves pushed to the brink. Hannibal's tactics were unlike anything they had faced before. At the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, he managed to surround and almost completely destroy a Roman army twice the size of his own. It was a disaster that would have broken many nations, but not Rome. Showing incredible resilience, the Romans adopted a new strategy. Instead of trying to defeat Hannibal head-on, they began targeting his supply lines and allies. This war of attrition slowly but surely turned the tide. Meanwhile, a brilliant young Roman general named Scipio Africanus decided to take the fight to Carthage itself. Scipio's campaign in North Africa forced Hannibal to return home to defend his city. The two great commanders finally met at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. In a contest of tactical genius, Scipio emerged victorious, effectively ending the Second Punic War and cementing his place in history. But even this wasn't enough for Rome. The Third Punic War, starting in 149 BC, was less about strategy and more about Rome's determination to eliminate its rival once and for all. Despite Carthage's attempts to appease Rome, the conflict ended with the complete destruction of the ancient city in 146 BCE. The Romans reportedly sowed the ground with salt, ensuring nothing would grow there again, a symbolic act of utter annihilation. The Punic Wars marked a turning point for Rome. By defeating Carthage, Rome had removed its greatest rival and established itself as the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. This victory opened the door for further expansion and set Rome on the path to becoming a true empire. The fall of Corinth and Rome's conquest of Greece. In the same year that Carthage met its demise, Rome turned its attention to Greece. The Achaean League, a coalition of Greek city-states, had been a thorn in Rome's side for decades. Tensions had been building, and now Rome was ready to assert its dominance once and for all. The Roman forces, battle-hardened from their victory over Carthage, faced off against the Achaean League. Despite the Greeks' rich military history, they were no match for Rome's superior tactics and organization. The Roman victory was swift and decisive, marking the end of Greek independence. At the heart of this conflict was Corinth, a wealthy and influential city known for its strategic location and cultural significance. Rome decided to make an example of Corinth, sending a clear message to any who might challenge their authority. The city was razed to the ground, its inhabitants killed or sold into slavery. This brutal act shocked the ancient world and demonstrated Rome's willingness to use extreme measures to maintain its power. The fall of Corinth wasn't just a military victory, it was a cultural turning point. Greece, once the pinnacle of ancient civilization, now found itself under Roman rule. The conquered territory was reorganized as the province of Achaia, fully integrated into the expanding Roman Republic. But the story of Rome's conquest of Greece isn't just one of destruction. In a twist of historical irony, the conquerors found themselves captivated by the culture of the conquered. Roman elites had long admired Greek art, philosophy, and literature. Now, with direct access to these cultural treasures, Rome experienced a wave of Hellenization. Greek artworks were shipped back to Rome by the boatload. Roman students flocked to Athens to study philosophy. Greek tutors became highly sought after in Roman households. This cultural exchange created a unique blend of Greek and Roman elements that would come to define the classical world. The Romans adopted and adapted Greek gods, merging them with their own deities. Greek architectural styles influenced Roman buildings, leading to innovations like the Corinthian column. Even the Latin alphabet was modified to better represent Greek loanwords. This Greco-Roman fusion wasn't just about art and architecture. It had profound effects on Roman thought and governance. Greek ideas about democracy and republicanism influenced Roman political discourse. Stoic philosophy, with its emphasis on duty and virtue, became popular among Roman elites and shaped their approach to leadership. The conquest of Greece marked a significant shift in Rome's status. No longer just a regional power, Rome had now established itself as the supreme force in the Mediterranean. The fall of Corinth demonstrated that Rome could dominate not just militarily, but politically and culturally as well. The Gracchi reforms spark social unrest. Rome's meteoric rise to power came with a heavy price. As the Republic expanded, a dangerous divide was growing within its very heart. Between 133 BCE and 121 BCE, Rome faced a period of intense social and political upheaval. At the center of this turmoil were two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. These young reformers, born into a prominent Roman family, set out to address the growing inequality that plagued Roman society. The root of the problem lay in Rome's rapid expansion. As the Republic conquered new territories, vast tracts of land fell under Roman control. In theory, this public land was meant to benefit all citizens. In practice, wealthy elites monopolized these resources, amassing huge estates while many ordinary Romans struggled to make ends meet. Tiberius Gracchus, elected as tribune in 133 BCE, promised a bold solution. He wanted to redistribute public land to Rome's poor citizens, setting limits on how much land any individual could hold. This land reform aimed to create a class of small farmers, strengthening Rome's agricultural base and providing opportunities for the less fortunate. However, Tiberius's proposals met fierce resistance from the Senate and wealthy landowners. They saw his reforms as a direct threat to their power and privilege. The political atmosphere in Rome grew increasingly tense as Tiberius pushed forward with his agenda. In a shocking turn of events, Tiberius Gracchus was assassinated in 133 BCE. A group of senators and their supporters attacked him and his followers, beating them to death with clubs and stones. This violent act marked a dark turning point in Roman politics, signaling that even elected officials weren't safe from harm. A decade later, Tiberius's younger brother Gaius took up the cause of reform. Elected tribune in 123 BCE, Gaius introduced an even more comprehensive set of proposals. He not only continued his brother's land reform efforts, but also introduced subsidized grain for Rome's urban poor and sought to extend citizenship rights to Rome's Italian allies. Gaius's reforms were initially popular with the common people, but they further angered the conservative elements in the Senate. The political elite saw Gaius as an even greater threat than his brother, fearing he might amass too much popular support and upset the traditional balance of power. Like his brother before him, Gaius Gracchus met a violent end. In 121 BCE, facing mounting opposition and threats of violence, Gaius and his supporters barricaded themselves on the Aventine Hill. The Senate declared martial law and sent armed forces to confront them. In the ensuing chaos, Gaius either took his own life or was killed by a slave at his command to avoid capture. The deaths of the Gracchi brothers and the failure of their reforms exposed deep fissures within Roman society. The divide between the wealthy elite and the common people had grown too wide to ignore. The Senate's violent resistance to change revealed its unwillingness to address the pressing issues facing the Republic. Moreover, the Gracchi episode demonstrated the increasing role of violence in Roman politics. Assassinations and mob violence became tools for settling political disputes, setting a dangerous precedent for the future. The traditional norms and institutions of the Republic were starting to buckle under the weight of social and economic pressures. Marius reforms the Roman army. While violence gripped Rome's streets, a quiet revolution was brewing in its legions. In 107 BCE, one man's vision would transform a citizen militia into the most formidable fighting force the ancient world had ever seen. But at what cost to the Republic? Gaius Marius, a seasoned general and skilled politician, saw the flaws in Rome's military system. The army had long been a force of citizen soldiers, men who owned property and could afford their own equipment. This system worked well when Rome's wars were close to home, but as the Republic expanded, it struggled to maintain a large enough force for distant campaigns. Marius made a radical decision. He abolished the property requirement for military service, opening the ranks to the landless poor. This change had far-reaching consequences. Suddenly, men who had no other prospects could join the army, receive training, and earn a steady income. The Roman military transformed from a part-time militia into a professional, full-time force. But Marius didn't stop there. He standardized the equipment and training of the legions. Before his reforms, soldiers had to provide their own gear, leading to inconsistencies in quality and capability. Now, the state supplied weapons and armor, ensuring every soldier was well equipped for battle. This standardization made the Roman army more cohesive and adaptable on the battlefield. Marius also reorganized the structure of the legions. He replaced the old maniple system with a more flexible cohort system. This new arrangement allowed for greater tactical flexibility and made it easier for commanders to control large numbers of troops in battle. The Roman army became a more efficient and effective fighting machine. One of Marius's most significant innovations was the creation of a retirement system for soldiers. After completing their service, veterans were granted land and wealth. This system solved two problems at once. It provided an incentive for men to join the army and serve loyally, and it helped settle Rome's newly conquered territories with experienced soldiers who could defend the frontiers. These reforms had an immediate impact on Rome's military capabilities. The army grew larger and more professional. It could undertake longer campaigns and operate effectively far from Rome. This newfound strength fueled Rome's expansion, allowing the Republic to conquer vast new territories and cement its position as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. However, Marius's reforms had unintended consequences that would shake the foundations of the Roman Republic. By making soldiers more dependent on their generals for equipment, pay, and future prospects, Marius inadvertently shifted their loyalties. Troops began to feel more allegiance to their commanders than to the state itself. This change in loyalty created a dangerous dynamic. Ambitious generals could now use their armies as personal power bases, leveraging their soldiers' loyalty for political gain. The stage was set for powerful military leaders to challenge the authority of the Senate and traditional institutions of the Republic. Moreover, the promise of land grants to veterans put pressure on Rome to continue expanding. The need to reward soldiers with conquered territory became a driving force behind Roman foreign policy, pushing the Republic into an ever-widening circle of conquest and conflict. Sulla's civil war and dictatorship. Rome's appetite for conquest had created a beast it could no longer control. The loyalty of soldiers to their generals would soon be put to the ultimate test, challenging the very foundations of the Republic. In 88 BCE, the unthinkable happened. A Roman general turned his army against Rome itself. The crisis began with a clash between two powerful figures, Sulla and his former mentor, Gaius Marius. Both men wanted command of the army for a campaign against Mithridates, the king of Pontus. Sulla had been legally appointed to lead the expedition, but Marius used his political influence to have the command transferred to himself. Sulla, unwilling to give up his position, made a decision that would change Roman history forever. In a bold and unprecedented move, Sulla marched his legions on Rome. This was a shocking breach of Roman tradition and law. Never before had a Roman general used his own army against the city itself. The sight of Roman legions approaching the capital sent waves of fear and disbelief through the population. Sulla's actions marked a dangerous escalation in the use of military power for political gain. Sulla's march on Rome was successful, and he forced Marius and his supporters to flee. But this was just the beginning of a brutal civil war that would engulf Rome for the next 6 years. The conflict saw Roman fighting against Roman, with both sides committing atrocities. Cities were besieged, citizens were massacred, and the countryside was ravaged by competing armies. By 82 BCE, Sulla had emerged victorious. He entered Rome once again, this time declaring himself dictator. Unlike previous dictators, who were appointed for short periods during emergencies, Sulla's dictatorship had no time limit. He used this position to implement sweeping reforms aimed at strengthening the power of the Senate and limiting the influence of popular assemblies and tribunes. Sulla's dictatorship was marked by a reign of terror known as the proscriptions. He published lists of his enemies, declaring them outlaws who could be killed on sight. Their property was confiscated, and rewards were offered for their deaths. This brutal purge eliminated many of Sulla's political rivals and struck fear into the hearts of Romans across the city and beyond. Thousands were killed or exiled, and the atmosphere in Rome was one of constant suspicion and dread. Despite the brutality of his rule, Sulla did implement significant constitutional reforms. He increased the size of the Senate and restricted the power of the tribunes, aiming to restore what he saw as the traditional balance of power in Rome. He also reorganized the court system and codified many laws. These changes had lasting effects on Roman governance, though not always in the ways Sulla had intended. In a move that surprised many, Sulla voluntarily resigned his dictatorship in 79 BCE and retired from public life. He had achieved his goals of reforming the Roman constitution and eliminating his enemies. Sulla's retirement showed that he genuinely believed in the republican system he claimed to be defending, even if his methods had been far from democratic. However, Sulla's actions had set a dangerous precedent. He had shown that a general with a loyal army could seize power in Rome and rule through force. This lesson was not lost on future ambitious leaders, who would follow in Sulla's footsteps with even more far-reaching consequences for the Republic. The formation of the First Triumvirate. While Sulla's actions had set a dangerous precedent, an even more insidious threat to the Republic was brewing. In 60 BCE, 3 of Rome's most powerful figures came together in a private alliance that would reshape Roman politics. This informal pact, known as the First Triumvirate, brought together Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Each man was a force to be reckoned with on his own, but together they formed a political juggernaut that would dominate Rome for years to come. The First Triumvirate wasn't born out of a shared vision for Rome's future. Instead, it was a marriage of convenience, driven by the personal ambitions of its members. Each man saw the alliance as a way to advance his own interests and overcome the obstacles posed by the Senate and their political rivals. Julius Caesar, a rising star in Roman politics, needed the support of his fellow triumvirs to secure his consulship and gain a military command. Caesar's ambitions were no secret in Rome. He sought glory on the battlefield and the political power that came with military success. The alliance offered him a path to achieve these goals, despite opposition from conservative elements in the Senate. Pompey, already celebrated as Rome's greatest general, had his own agenda. He needed the political muscle to secure land grants for his veterans and ratify his eastern settlements. Pompey had spent years campaigning in the East, expanding Rome's influence and his own reputation. Now, he wanted to ensure that his achievements were recognized and rewarded back home. Crassus, often overshadowed by his more famous allies, was nonetheless a crucial part of the Triumvirate. As one of Rome's wealthiest men, he provided the financial backbone for the alliance. But Crassus wanted more than just money. He craved the political influence and military glory that had so far eluded him. The Triumvirate offered him a chance to step out of the shadows and claim a place among Rome's most powerful men. Together, these three men wielded enormous power. They used their combined influence to dominate Roman politics, often bypassing or ignoring traditional republican institutions. The Senate, which had long been the center of political authority in Rome, found itself increasingly sidelined by the triumvirs' backroom dealings. The First Triumvirate's power was first demonstrated during Caesar's consulship in 59 BCE. With the support of his allies, Caesar pushed through key legislation that benefited all three men. He secured the land grants Pompey wanted for his veterans and ratified his eastern settlements. Crassus saw his business interests protected and expanded. And Caesar himself gained the military command he had long sought, setting the stage for his famous conquest of Gaul. However, the alliance was built on shaky ground. Each man was driven more by personal ambition than any genuine sense of unity or shared purpose. As their individual power and influence grew, so did the tensions between them. Rivalries and competing ambitions began to strain the bonds of their alliance. The First Triumvirate marked a significant shift in Roman politics. It showed that real power now lay not with the Senate or the people's assemblies, but with a handful of influential men who could manipulate the system to their advantage. This private agreement between three individuals had effectively bypassed the checks and balances that were meant to prevent any one person or group from gaining too much control. Julius Caesar crosses the Rubicon. The stage was set for a showdown that would shake the Roman Republic to its core. In 49 BCE, Julius Caesar stood at the banks of a small river called the Rubicon. This seemingly insignificant stream marked the boundary between his province of Gaul and Italy proper. But for Caesar, it represented a point of no return. For years, tensions had been building between Caesar and the Roman Senate. His military campaigns in Gaul had brought him unprecedented fame and wealth, but they also made him a threat to the established order. The Senate, led by Caesar's former ally Pompey the Great, demanded that he lay down his command and return to Rome as a private citizen. They feared Caesar's growing power and popularity among the common people. Caesar knew that if he obeyed, he would be vulnerable to prosecution by his political enemies. But if he refused, he would be declaring himself an enemy of the state. As he stood on the banks of the Rubicon, Caesar weighed his options. The future of Rome hung in the balance. With a fateful decision, Caesar uttered the famous words, "The die is cast," and ordered his army to cross the river. This act was more than just a military maneuver. It was a direct challenge to the authority of the Senate and the traditions of the Roman Republic. By bringing an armed force into Italy, Caesar had committed treason. As news of Caesar's advance spread, panic gripped Rome. Pompey and many senators fled the city, unable to muster a defense against Caesar's battle-hardened legions. In a matter of weeks, Caesar had taken control of Italy without a single major battle. The speed and decisiveness of his actions left his opponents reeling. The crossing of the Rubicon marked the beginning of a bloody civil war that would rage across the Roman world. Caesar pursued Pompey and his allies across Greece and into Egypt, defeating them in a series of decisive battles. With each victory, Caesar consolidated his power and undermined the authority of the Senate. The consequences of Caesar's actions were far-reaching. The traditional balance of power in Rome, carefully maintained for centuries, had been upended. The Republic, already weakened by years of political violence and corruption, now faced an existential crisis. Caesar's military success translated into political dominance, paving the way for his eventual declaration as dictator for life. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" has since entered common language, symbolizing a point of no return or an irreversible decision. For Caesar, it was the moment he chose personal ambition over republican tradition. For Rome, it marked the beginning of the end of the Republic and the dawn of the imperial era. Caesar's bold move demonstrated the growing power of military commanders in Roman politics. It showed that a general with a loyal army could challenge the established order and seize control of the state. This dangerous precedent would be followed by future leaders, further eroding the foundations of republican government. Caesar declares himself dictator for life. The Republic was crumbling, and Julius Caesar stood at its center. In 44 BCE, after years of civil war and political maneuvering, Caesar made a move that would forever change the course of Roman history. He declared himself Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. This unprecedented action sent shockwaves through Rome as citizens and senators alike grappled with its implications. Caesar's path to this moment had been paved with military victories and political cunning. He had defeated his rivals, including his former ally Pompey the Great, in a series of brutal campaigns that spanned the Roman world. With each victory, Caesar's power and influence grew until he stood unrivaled in Rome. As dictator, Caesar set about implementing a series of sweeping reforms. He understood that Rome needed to change if it was to survive and thrive. One of his most lasting contributions was the reorganization of the Roman calendar. The Julian calendar, as it came to be known, brought order to the chaotic system that had existed before. Caesar also tackled the pressing issue of debt, providing relief to many struggling citizens. In a move that would have far-reaching consequences, he extended Roman citizenship to many in the provinces, beginning the process of integrating Rome's vast territories into a more cohesive whole. Caesar claimed that his actions were necessary to stabilize Rome after years of turmoil. He portrayed himself as a reformer, working to address the Republic's deep-seated problems. But many senators saw things differently. They watched with growing alarm as Caesar accumulated more and more power, fearing that he was dismantling the very foundations of the Republic. Their suspicions were fueled by Caesar's acceptance of honors traditionally reserved for kings. He began to wear a laurel crown, a symbol of victory but also of royal power. He took on unprecedented authority, making decisions that would have once required the approval of the Senate or the people's assemblies. To many, it seemed that Caesar was not content with being merely the first among equals. He wanted to be king in all but name. As opposition to Caesar's rule grew, a group of senators began to plot against him. Led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, these men saw themselves as defenders of the Republic. They believed that Caesar's rule was a threat to everything Rome stood for: its traditions, its institutions, and its hard-won liberties. Caesar's declaration as dictator for life proved to be the final straw. It crystallized the fears of those who had opposed him and gave urgency to their plans. The conspirators knew that they had to act quickly before Caesar's power became truly unassailable. The assassination of Julius Caesar. On March 15th, 44 BCE, Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, met his fate at the hands of his own colleagues. A group of senators, led by Gaius Cassius and Marcus Junius Brutus, had hatched a plot to assassinate Caesar. Their goal was nothing less than to save the Republic itself. In their eyes, Caesar had become a tyrant, threatening the very foundations of Roman democracy. The conspirators had carefully planned every detail. They lured Caesar to the Senate, meeting under the guise of discussing important matters of state. As Caesar took his seat, the senators gathered around him, their togas concealing the daggers they carried. Suddenly, the attack began. The senators rushed forward, their blades flashing in the light as they struck Caesar again and again. In the chaos of the moment, Caesar fought back, but he was overwhelmed by the sheer number of his attackers. As the blows rained down, Caesar is said to have uttered the famous last words, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" These words, immortalized by Shakespeare, capture the betrayal Caesar must have felt as he saw his friend Brutus among his killers. However, historians debate whether Caesar actually spoke these words or if they were added later for dramatic effect. The assassination was brutal and efficient. Caesar was stabbed 23 times. His body left crumpled at the base of a statue of Pompey, his old rival. The conspirators, their togas stained with blood, rushed out of the theater, proclaiming they had freed Rome from a tyrant. But the assassins had miscalculated. They believed that by removing Caesar, they would restore the Republic to its former glory. Instead, they plunged Rome into chaos. The people of Rome, far from celebrating Caesar's death, were shocked and angry. Caesar had been popular among the common people, who saw him as a champion of their interests. In the days following the assassination, Rome teetered on the brink of anarchy. Mark Antony, Caesar's close friend and ally, gave a stirring funeral oration that turned public opinion against the conspirators. The people rioted, forcing Brutus, Cassius, and their allies to flee the city. The power vacuum left by Caesar's death soon led to another civil war. Various factions vied for control, with Caesar's young heir Octavian emerging as a key player. Octavian, later known as Augustus, would eventually defeat all rivals and establish himself as Rome's first emperor, bringing an end to the republic that the conspirators had sought to preserve. The Battle of Actium and the Rise of Augustus. In the wake of Caesar's assassination, Rome was plunged into chaos. The power vacuum left by his death sparked another round of civil war, with various factions vying for control. Out of this turmoil emerged two key players: Octavian, Caesar's young heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend and ally. Their struggle for supremacy would culminate in a decisive battle that would shape the future of Rome. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE marked the final showdown between Octavian and the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Antony and Cleopatra had formed a political and romantic alliance, combining their resources to challenge Octavian's growing power. The stage was set for a clash that would determine the fate of the Roman world. The battle took place off the coast of Greece, near the promontory of Actium. Octavian's fleet, under the command of his skilled general Agrippa, faced off against the naval forces of Antony and Cleopatra. Despite having a larger fleet, Antony and Cleopatra found themselves outmaneuvered by Agrippa's superior tactics. The battle raged for hours, with ships ramming each other and soldiers fighting hand-to-hand on the decks. As the tide of battle turned against them, Cleopatra made a fatal decision. She ordered her ships to retreat, breaking through the Roman lines and fleeing towards Egypt. Antony, seeing his lover's departure, abandoned his own men and followed her. This act of desertion sealed their fate and handed victory to Octavian. The aftermath of Actium was swift and decisive. Octavian pursued the fleeing couple to Egypt, where they faced their final defeat. Unable to escape and unwilling to be paraded through Rome as captives, both Antony and Cleopatra took their own lives. With their deaths, Octavian stood as the unchallenged ruler of the Roman world. Octavian's victory at Actium brought an end to decades of civil war and instability. He set about consolidating his power, careful to maintain the appearance of republican traditions while gradually assuming more control. In 27 BCE, in a carefully orchestrated gesture, Octavian offered to give up his extraordinary powers to the Senate. The Senate, recognizing the need for stability, refused and instead granted him the title of Augustus, meaning the revered one. This moment marked the official beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus, as Octavian was now known, became the first Roman emperor, though he preferred the title princeps or first citizen. He established a system of government that maintained the facade of the old republic while centralizing real power in his own hands. The Battle of Actium and the subsequent rise of Augustus ushered in a new era for Rome. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, began, a period of relative stability and prosperity that would last for centuries. The old republican system, which had struggled to govern a vast empire, gave way to a more centralized and efficient form of rule. Yet even as Rome entered this new phase of its history, the echoes of the Republic remained. Augustus was careful to present himself not as a king, but as the first among equals, preserving the illusion of republican government, even as he wielded near-absolute power. The Battle of Actium had not just decided a war, it had shaped the future of an empire. The Great Fire of Rome under Nero. From the ashes of civil war, Rome had risen to new heights under Augustus. But less than a century later, the Eternal City would face a disaster that still captures our imagination. The Great Fire of 64 CE wasn't just a tragedy. It was a pivotal moment that revealed the true nature of imperial power and reshaped the face of Rome itself. It all started on a hot summer night in July. In the crowded shops near the Circus Maximus, a small fire broke out. But in the tightly packed wooden buildings of ancient Rome, that spark quickly grew into an inferno. For 6 long days, the flames raged through the heart of the city. The narrow streets and densely packed insulae or apartment buildings acted like kindling, helping the fire spread rapidly from district to district. Emperor Nero was away in Antium when the fire began. As soon as he heard the news, he rushed back to Rome to take charge of the relief efforts. Nero opened up his palaces to shelter those who had lost their homes. He organized the distribution of food and set up temporary shelters. These actions paint a picture of an emperor genuinely concerned for his people's welfare. But rumors began to spread. Some whispered that Nero himself had started the fire, either through carelessness or as part of a grand plan to rebuild Rome in his own vision. The most famous story claims that Nero fiddled while Rome burned, playing his lyre and singing about the destruction of Troy as he watched the city go up in flames. This tale, while dramatic, is almost certainly false. The fiddle didn't even exist in ancient Rome. Nero needed a scapegoat to deflect blame from himself. He found one in Rome's small Christian community. Christians were already viewed with suspicion by many Romans, who saw their refusal to worship the traditional gods as dangerous and subversive. Nero seized on this mistrust, accusing the Christians of starting the fire. What followed was a brutal persecution. Christians were arrested, tortured, and executed in horrific public spectacles. In the wake of the fire, Nero launched an ambitious rebuilding program. At the center of this new Rome would be his Domus Aurea, or Golden House. This massive palace complex sprawled across the city, featuring lavish gardens, an artificial lake, and a colossal statue of Nero himself. The Domus Aurea was a testament to Nero's ego and his vision for a new, grander Rome rising from the ashes of the old. The Year of the Four Emperors. The Year of the Four Emperors in 69 CE plunged the Roman Empire into chaos. After Nero's death in 68 CE, there was no clear successor to the throne. This power vacuum set off a struggle among rival claimants that would reshape Rome's political landscape. Galba, a governor backed by the Senate, was the first to seize power. But his reign was short-lived. Galba's harsh policies and unpopularity with the troops spelled his doom. In January 69 CE, he was assassinated in the streets of Rome, setting off a chain of events that would see 3 more emperors rise and fall in quick succession. Otho, the mastermind behind Galba's murder, declared himself emperor next. But his claim to the throne wasn't unchallenged. Vitellius, a general commanding legions in Germany, had his own imperial ambitions. The two rivals faced off at the Battle of Bedriacum in northern Italy. Otho's forces were defeated, and rather than continue to fight, Otho took his own life. This left Vitellius as the new emperor of Rome. But Vitellius's triumph was short-lived. His reign was marked by indulgence and unpopular decisions. As word of his excesses spread, discontent grew among the legions stationed in the eastern provinces. These troops decided to back their own commander, Vespasian, as emperor. Vespasian's forces began their march on Rome, gathering support along the way. By December 69 CE, they had reached the capital. In a series of battles in and around the city, Vitellius was defeated and killed. Vespasian emerged as the victor, establishing the Flavian dynasty and bringing an end to the Year of Chaos. The Year of the Four Emperors revealed some hard truths about the nature of imperial power in Rome. It showed how fragile the system of succession had become. Without clear rules for passing on the throne, ambitious generals and politicians could make their own bids for power. The year also demonstrated the enormous influence of the army in choosing Rome's rulers. Legions could make or break an emperor based on their loyalty. The destruction of Jerusalem by Titus. In 70 CE, the Roman Empire faced a critical challenge in its eastern provinces. The Jewish revolt in Judea, which had been simmering for years, reached its boiling point. Emperor Vespasian, who had started the campaign to quell the rebellion, handed over command to his son Titus. The young general was tasked with ending the uprising once and for all. Titus marched on Jerusalem with a massive army. The city, long a symbol of Jewish faith and resistance, was about to face its greatest test. As Roman legions approached, Jerusalem's defenders prepared for a siege. They knew the stakes were high. This was a fight for their very existence as a people. The Roman army encircled Jerusalem, cutting off all supplies to the city. Titus employed a strategy of attrition, hoping to starve the defenders into submission. As weeks turned into months, conditions inside Jerusalem became desperate. Food and water grew scarce, and disease spread through the crowded streets. Yet the Jewish defenders refused to yield, their determination fueled by faith and the hope of divine intervention. As the siege dragged on, tensions within Jerusalem's walls rose. Different factions among the defenders fought for control, weakening the city's ability to resist the Roman onslaught. Meanwhile, Titus tightened his grip, constructing a wall around the entire city to prevent any escape or relief. Finally, after a brutal 5-month siege, the Romans breached Jerusalem's defenses. What followed was a scene of unimaginable destruction. Roman soldiers poured into the city, putting its inhabitants to the sword and setting fire to buildings. The crowning moment of this devastation was the destruction of the Second Temple, the holiest site in Judaism. The temple's fall was a catastrophic blow to Jewish identity and faith. For centuries, it had been the center of Jewish religious life, the place where God was believed to dwell among his people. Now, it lay in ruins, its sacred artifacts looted by Roman soldiers. The destruction was so complete that only a single wall of the temple complex remained standing, what would later become known as the Western Wall. Titus returned to Rome in triumph, celebrating his victory over Judea. The spoils of war, including the sacred menorah from the temple, were paraded through the streets of the capital. This event was immortalized on the Arch of Titus, a monument that still stands in Rome today. The arch's relief sculptures depict Roman soldiers carrying the temple treasures, a permanent reminder of Rome's victory and Jewish defeat. The fall of Jerusalem marked the end of the First Jewish-Roman War, but its impact reached far beyond the battlefield. For the Jewish people, it was a turning point in history. Without the temple as the center of their religious life, they had to find new ways to preserve their faith and identity. This led to the development of Rabbinic Judaism, which emphasized the study of Torah and observance of Jewish law as a means of maintaining their connection to God. The construction of the Colosseum. While Jerusalem lay in ruins, Rome was about to unveil a structure that would become the new beating heart of its empire. In AD CE, Emperor Titus inaugurated the Colosseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheater, with grand celebrations. This massive arena was more than just a venue for entertainment. It was a symbol of Roman power and ingenuity. The Colosseum's story began a decade earlier under Emperor Vespasian. In 70 CE, he started construction as a gift to the Roman people. This wasn't just an act of generosity, it was a clever political move. Vespasian wanted to show that his new Flavian dynasty cared about public welfare, unlike his predecessor Nero, who was known for his self-indulgence. Speaking of Nero, the Colosseum's location was significant. It was built on the site of Nero's private lake, part of his sprawling Domus Aurea, or Golden House. By repurposing this land for public use, Vespasian sent a clear message. The days of imperial excess were over. The new regime was all about giving back to the people. The Colosseum was an architectural marvel. It could hold up to 50,000 spectators, making it the largest amphitheater ever built. The Romans used advanced engineering techniques to create this massive structure. They employed a system of arches and vaults that distributed the weight evenly, allowing them to build higher and create more space inside. One of the Colosseum's most impressive features was its retractable awning. On hot days, sailors would unfurl huge canvas sheets to provide shade for the spectators. This complex system of ropes and pulleys was a testament to Roman engineering skills. Below the arena floor, a network of underground passages and rooms housed animals, gladiators, and stage props. This hidden world allowed for elaborate spectacles to be staged, with performers and animals seeming to appear as if by magic. The opening ceremonies for the Colosseum were spectacular. Titus ordered 100 days of games to celebrate its completion. The events included gladiatorial combats, where trained fighters faced off against each other or wild animals. There were also animal hunts, where exotic beasts from across the empire were put on display and then killed for the crowd's entertainment. Perhaps the most impressive spectacles were the mock naval battles. The arena could be flooded with water, allowing ships to sail in and recreate famous sea fights from history. These elaborate shows demonstrated Rome's mastery over nature and its ability to bring the wonders of the empire to its citizens. The Colosseum quickly became a cultural and social hub for Rome. It wasn't just about the games, it was a place to see and be seen. The seating arrangement reflected the strict social hierarchy of Roman society. The emperor had the best seat, of course, followed by the senators, then the equestrians, and finally, the common people. The assassination of Commodus and the end of the 5 good emperors. The story of Rome's 5 good emperors came to a dramatic end in 192 CE with the assassination of Commodus. This event marked not just the fall of one man, but the collapse of a system that had brought stability and prosperity to the empire for nearly a century. Commodus was the son of Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good emperors. But he couldn't have been more different from his father. While Marcus Aurelius was known for his wisdom and dedication to duty, Commodus was all about indulgence and self-glorification. He saw himself as a living god, even going so far as to declare himself a reincarnation of Hercules. He would dress up in a lion's skin and parade around Rome, acting out the part of the mythical hero. But Commodus wasn't content with just playing dress-up. He actually renamed Rome after himself, calling it Colonia Commodiana. It was as if he wanted to erase the city's long history and remake it in his own image. This kind of behavior didn't sit well with the Roman elite, who saw it as a sign of the emperor's growing instability. Commodus's reign was marked by political purges and mismanagement. He neglected the day-to-day business of running the empire, preferring to spend his time in the gladiatorial arena. He would fight in staged battles against disabled opponents or wild animals that had been drugged or restrained. These displays were meant to show off his strength and bravery, but they just made him look ridiculous in the eyes of many Romans. As time went on, Commodus's behavior became more and more erratic. He started to see enemies everywhere and launched a series of brutal crackdowns on anyone he perceived as a threat. This paranoia and violence alienated even his closest supporters. The Senate, the military, and the common people all grew to resent their unstable emperor. By the end of 192 CE, the situation had become unbearable. A group of conspirators, including Commodus's mistress, Marcia, and several high-ranking officials, decided that the emperor had to go. They were afraid that if they didn't act, Commodus would consolidate even more power and become truly unstoppable. On December 31st, 192 CE, the conspirators put their plan into action. First, they tried to poison Commodus, but he vomited up the tainted food. Realizing their plot had been discovered, they sent in a wrestler named Narcissus to finish the job. Narcissus strangled the emperor in his bath, bringing an inglorious end to Commodus's reign and the Antonine dynasty. The assassination of Commodus marked the end of the Golden Age for Rome. The five good emperors, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, had ruled with wisdom and competence, bringing peace and prosperity to the empire. But with Commodus's death, that era of stability came crashing down. The year 193 CE became known as the Year of the Five Emperors. In the span of just 12 months, 5 different men would claim the imperial throne. The empire was plunged into civil war as rival claimants and their supporters battled for supremacy. The chaos and bloodshed of this period showed just how fragile Rome's political system had become. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge. The empire's fragility continued to be exposed in the centuries that followed. But it was a battle in 312 CE that would reshape Rome's future in ways no one could have imagined. What if I told you that a single dream on the eve of this conflict would alter the course of Western civilization forever? The Battle of the Milvian Bridge, fought on October 28, 312 CE, was a pivotal moment in Roman history. It pitted 2 powerful rivals against each other, Constantine and Maxentius. Both men claimed the title of emperor, and both were determined to rule Rome. The stage was set for a showdown that would decide the fate of an empire. On the night before the battle, Constantine had a strange experience. He reportedly saw a vision in the sky, a Christian symbol accompanied by the words, "In this sign you will conquer." This was odd because Constantine wasn't a Christian. The empire was still largely pagan at this time, with Christians often facing persecution. But Constantine, whether out of genuine belief or political calculation, decided to embrace this sign. The next morning, Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint the Chi-Rho symbol on their shields. This symbol, formed by superimposing the first two letters of the Greek word for Christ, would become a powerful emblem in Christianity. It was a bold move that signaled a significant shift in Roman attitudes towards this once persecuted religion. As the two armies faced each other across the Tiber River, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Maxentius had the advantage of numbers, with an army nearly twice the size of Constantine's. He also had the benefit of fighting on home turf, defending Rome itself. But Constantine had something else on his side, a newfound sense of divine purpose. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Constantine's troops, emboldened by their new symbol, fought with incredible determination. They pushed Maxentius's forces back towards the river. In the heat of the battle, Maxentius made a fatal mistake. He ordered his troops to retreat across the Tiber on a temporary bridge made of boats. But the structure couldn't handle the weight of so many fleeing soldiers. It collapsed, plunging men and horses into the river's swirling waters. Maxentius himself was among those who fell into the Tiber. Weighed down by his heavy armor, he quickly sank and drowned. His body was later recovered, and his head paraded through the streets of Rome as proof of Constantine's victory. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge did more than just secure Constantine's position as emperor. It marked a turning point for Christianity within the Roman Empire. Constantine, attributing his victory to the Christian God, began to favor the religion. In 313 CE, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious tolerance to Christians throughout the empire. This was a revolutionary change, ending centuries of persecution and paving the way for Christianity to become the dominant faith in Europe. The sack of Rome by the Visigoths. Rome had stood undefeated for over 800 years, its walls a symbol of invincibility. But in 410 CE, those walls would fail, and with them, the myth of Rome's immortality. The Visigoths, a Germanic tribe led by their king Alaric, breached the city's defenses and sacked the Eternal City. This event sent shockwaves across the empire and marked a turning point in Roman history. The Visigoths weren't always enemies of Rome. They started as allies, serving in the Roman army and settling within imperial borders. But years of broken promises and unfair treatment had turned them against their former patrons. Alaric and his people wanted land to call their own and recognition as equal partners in the empire. When these demands went unmet, they decided to take matters into their own hands. For years, Alaric led his forces back and forth across Italy, laying siege to Rome multiple times. Each time, the Romans managed to buy him off with gold and promises. But by 410, Alaric had run out of patience. On August 24th, his army entered Rome through the Salarian Gate, possibly with help from sympathizers inside the city. What followed was 3 days of looting and destruction. The Visigoths ransacked homes, palaces, and public buildings, carrying off wealth that had been accumulating for centuries. But the sack wasn't as brutal as it could have been. Alaric, a Christian himself, ordered his men to spare the churches and those who sought sanctuary within them. St. Peter's Basilica, already an important Christian site, was left untouched. Even with this restraint, the psychological impact of Rome's fall was enormous. For centuries, Rome had believed their city was under divine protection. Now, that illusion was shattered. The poet Jerome, living in Bethlehem at the time, wrote, "My voice sticks in my throat, and as I dictate, sobs choke my utterance." The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken. The sack of Rome wasn't just a military defeat, it was the culmination of problems that had been building for decades. The empire's borders had grown weak and porous, allowing various Germanic tribes to move into Roman territory. Many of these newcomers were fleeing the fierce Huns pushing them in from the east. Rome tried to manage this migration by settling some tribes as allies, but the system was breaking down. Internally, the empire was decaying. Political instability, economic troubles, and military setbacks had weakened Rome's ability to control its vast territories. The Visigoths were just one of many groups taking advantage of this weakness. Their success in breaching the Eternal City showed just how vulnerable Rome had become. In the aftermath of the sack, many Romans questioned their empire's future. Some saw it as divine punishment for abandoning the old gods in favor of Christianity. Others viewed it as a sign that the end times were near, but for most, it was a harsh wake-up call. The world was changing, and Rome would have to change with it, or face extinction. The Deposition of Romulus Augustulus. In 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire breathed its last. The final emperor, a mere teenager named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain. This moment marked the end of a long decline that had been eating away at the empire for decades. Romulus Augustulus wasn't really in charge. His father, Orestes, had put him on the throne as a puppet ruler. The empire was already falling apart, torn by internal fights and attacks from outside. Odoacer saw his chance and took it. He marched on Ravenna, where the Western Roman capital was. He kicked out Romulus and made himself king of Italy. But Odoacer did something different from other conquerors. He didn't call himself emperor. Instead, he sent the emperor's fancy clothes and crown to Zeno, the Eastern Roman emperor in Constantinople. This was like saying, "The Western Empire is done. It's all yours now." This didn't come out of nowhere. For a long time, the Western Empire had been in trouble. Money problems, political fights, and barbarian attacks had been wearing it down. Odoacer's takeover was just the final push that knocked it over. The fall of Rome in 476 CE was a big deal. People often say it's when the ancient world ended and the Middle Ages began. But it wasn't like everything Roman disappeared overnight. Roman culture, laws, and traditions stuck around. They shaped the kingdoms that came after and influenced Europe for a long time. Think about it like this. Rome's political power was gone, but its ideas lived on. It's like when a big tree falls in the forest. The tree is dead, but its seeds are everywhere, ready to grow into new trees. Roman civilization was like that. Its political tree fell, but its cultural seeds were spread all over Europe. The legacy of the Roman Empire lives on. The legacy of the Roman Empire stretches far beyond its fall in 476 CE. Even after the Western Empire crumbled, its influence continued to shape the world in profound ways. The Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, carried on Roman traditions, law, and culture for nearly 1,000 years until Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453 CE. Roman law left an indelible mark on legal systems across Europe and beyond. The Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive collection of Roman law compiled under Emperor Justinian, became the foundation for many modern legal codes. Its principles of justice and equality continue to influence legal thinking today. The Latin language, once the lingua franca of the empire, gave birth to the Romance languages. Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian all evolved from Latin, carrying echoes of Rome in their vocabulary and grammar. Latin also remains essential in scientific nomenclature, legal terminology, and religious texts. Roman engineering and architecture set standards that lasted for centuries. The empire's vast network of roads, aqueducts, and monumental structures showcased their technical prowess. Many Roman buildings still stand today, testaments to their durability and ingenuity. The principles of Roman urban planning and construction influenced city design well into the modern era. The political ideas of the Roman Republic left a lasting impact on later democracies. Concepts like representative government, checks and balances, and citizenship found new life in modern political systems. The founders of the United States, for example, drew inspiration from Roman Republican ideals when crafting their new nation's government. Christianity, which rose from a persecuted sect to the official religion of the empire, became one of the world's major faiths. As it spread throughout Europe and beyond, it carried with it elements of Roman culture and organization. The Church's use of Latin, its hierarchical structure, and its legal traditions all reflect its Roman origins. The concept of a unified Europe, first realized under Roman rule, has inspired political movements throughout history. The Holy Roman Empire attempted to recreate the glory of ancient Rome in medieval Europe. More recently, the European Union embodies the ideal of a continent united under common laws and institutions, echoing the Pax Romana of old. If you enjoyed this exploration, Subscribe for more documentaries that delve into history's most extraordinary empires and events. Let us know in the comments which part of Rome's story fascinated you the most. Thank you for watching. See you in the next documentary. And while you wait, check out our past episodes to uncover more incredible stories that shaped the course of history.